In today's tutorial, we'll be discussing different ways, I guess, to create facades in Revit. And mostly through the curtain wall family, we'll look at its type properties and the different parameters that you can adjust in order to create the architectural elements that you'd like to make. So what I like about curtain walls are that their parameters have enough flexibility to modify, for example, their mullions and panels so that you could get something like louvers or really modify them so you could even insert doors and walls, etc. So there's a lot of flexibility in that. And secondly, we'll look a little to in-place masses, and from there, how we can apply both curtain systems, but also curtain panel frames. So there's a bunch we're going to cover today, but we'll see how much we can get through. And then if not, then we'll have another session for next week. Okay, so when you open a new project file, by default, Revit in their wall section will have 3 curtain wall types, I'll call it. So we have curtain wall, exterior glazing, and storefront. And when I first started using Revit, I'm like, what's the actual difference? So visually here in our workspace, we have our curtain wall, our exterior glazing, and our storefront curtain wall types. So essentially, they're all the same thing. What is different between the 3 is how their grids have been determined. And what I mean by grids are these dashed blue lines that separate the panel into their divisions. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at each of their type properties and see what are the difference between them all. And we have a few sections that we'll be concerned with. Firstly, the construction section, which is how the curtain wall is composed. And then secondly, which is the difference now between all of these 3, is the horizontal vertical grids and their respective mullions. So in this case, our curtain wall without any divisions is not specified in grids or in the mullions. So we have nothing, it's a blank canvas, and you could apply your own custom grids to it. For example, going to the architecture tab and choosing curtain grid, we can apply our own grids at a specified dimensions, etc. When we look to our exterior glazing, so let's open the type properties for that. You'll see that there is now a specified layout for our vertical and horizontal grids. In this case, we have 6 feet in the vertical direction, and in the horizontal direction, it's 12 feet, and these are fixed distances. So compared to this curtain wall type, which had none, we have a fixed distance, and there are numerous options that we can go through. We can specify that this grid have a fixed number of panels rather than a specified distance. Or we can choose maximum spacing or minimum spacing, and these apply both to the vertical and the horizontal grid. So in these 2 sections is basically where you're mapping out the pattern of your grid. So if I were to change this, for example, to 2 feet and this to 2 feet, you'll have a grid of squares that are now part of this curtain wall. And once you have your grid specified, again, in the architecture tab panel, next to the curtain grid button, we have the mullions, and you could apply now structure to each part of the grid by hovering over the selected line and clicking. And there's still flexibility where you can first select the grid or mullion and unpin it. So one of the I guess, difficult things with curtain walls is that all of these little subcomponents or sub-elements are going to be pinned. So if you want to change that, you'll have to unpin it, and then you could specify a dimension, for example. And you're not limited to just the full grid. You can apply mullions to portions of the grid. So these three buttons will help you apply your mullions, etc. And lastly, so we have the grids that we can alter, we have mullions, and the last part is the panel. So what I'm doing is I'm hitting tab to toggle the selection between elements that are very close to each other. So I'm going to toggle to one of my panels, hitting tab, and that's the last component now that we can adjust in our curtain wall, which by default in the default curtain wall types, we have the options for empty system panels or solid system panels. What's pretty cool with curtain walls is that you can actually place already constructed walls. So we'll look at that in a bit. So yeah, those are the main parts of a curtain wall. And if we look to our storefront, again, it's just a different layouts that we have for our grid. And in this case, no mullions have been applied. So we'll look to that later. Some of the drawbacks with curtain walls are can't really insert items like doors or windows. There are, if you select one of the panels, and this I've had difficulties for a long time, but you can choose a glazing door that you could replace this panel, and it'll be graphically notated as the door, so you'll see the door swing and then the door panel. But for some reason, it like shows up and doesn't show up in Revit. So my suggestion is instead we can replace these system panels with a wall that represents a piece of glass. So what we could do is in our wall types, we can take, a generic wall and duplicate it. So when we duplicate it, we're creating a copy. And in this case, I want to call it glass 1 inch. And we need to now edit the structure of this wall so it represents that glass. So we'll change the thickness to 1 inch. And our material, it's not specified here, but we're going to choose a glass material. Hit OK. And now we have a wall that will represent a glass panel. So we'll head to this type property. And now I'm going to discuss the construction portion. And really our concern for now is curtain panel. So right now it's none, but we could specify it as a wall or a system panel, as I mentioned. But because we made this basic wall that's 1 inch glass, we want to choose that and apply it to our curtain wall. And now all these, what was initially system panels, will be changed to the wall that we created. And so what are the benefits of this? As I said, you can't place doors or windows into a curtain wall, but with a wall as your glass panels, now you could insert doors, you could insert windows, and just rearranging the layout of these grids in order for these to fit. And so it's a nice addition. Similarly, if I were to create a copy of this, but as a curved wall, our glass panels will be constructed as straight segments. So if our grid wasn't as small as it is currently, I'll change these to vertical layout of 8 feet by 8 feet. Yeah, so when I have a curved wall, you'll notice that they're all straight segments, and that goes the same for mullions. When we have our wall that represents the 1-inch glass, we can actually have them curved. So let me draw a curved wall. Yeah, so they'll actually be curved. I'm going to delete this because it's annoying. Okay, but that doesn't apply to our mullions. So right now I'm going to introduce mullions. We have some drop downs and not too many options. Circular mullion, rectangular mullion, doesn't really matter. I'll select one for both the vertical and the horizontal section. When we apply that, you'll notice that our mullions will not constrain to the curve of our wall. So one way we can solve that or rectify that issue is, instead of applying mullions, we're going to add a sweep to our wall that we created. And I mentioned how to create a sweep from the previous tutorial. So if you haven't, take a look at that. It was from last week. But in order to apply a sweep, we need to activate these parameters, which we can go to our preview of this wall. Right now we're in the floor plan, so we're looking at it from above, but we're going to change this to section, and now these parameters become modifiable now. So I want to apply a sweep to this, and we have some profiles already loaded, so you can add a profile, select the profile. In this case, I'll do like a brick profile. And when we apply, we can see that it's placed at the bottom, which is fine by me. Okay, and what a sweep does is it takes that profile and it extrudes it along the length of the wall. So because these are curved walls, the sweep will take on the curved profile. And so if you have any curved shapes in your building and curtain wall, and you want to create a curtain wall in that area, you'll want to first make your own wall that represents the glass, has the thickness and the material. And then you'll add the sweep, which will be the profile for your mullions. And again, profiles can be created through new families. So I'll go to new and family, and there'll be a list of templates in which you can choose from. We can go to profile mullion. Profile, open, and you'll be in this new workspace in which you could create the profile for that wall sweep. And I think you'll have to choose the profile usage. So there's many different profiles for certain families or elements. So in this case, we would want to make it a wall sweep. And then you could draw your profile, load it back into the project, and that will now be selectable in that edit type section that we just saw. So this is the first part. We can create now curved walls with curved mullions from a curtain wall. All right. So for my next example, we can also create louvers and slats from the curtain wall family. So what we can do is, let me delete this. I'll take one of these and copy them over. What we'll want for a system of louvers is to not have any system panels or wall panels, no horizontal grids, only our vertical grids and vertical mullions. So let's go about changing this existing curtain wall. And I'm going to make a duplicate called louvers. So now that our duplicate is made, it's going to have the same parameters as the wall type it was taking these parameters from. So we're not going to have any horizontal grid. That's going to be nothing. And our fixed distance could be something like a foot, not an inch, but a foot. And our vertical mullions, let's say, yeah, they're just regular circle mullion. Okay. And what, the grid line, that's fine. What I forgot to do is our system panel remains, and so does our rectangular mullion. So when we go to our type properties, just make sure that in the curtain panel, it's weird that even though it has none on, it's going to have some sort of panel on. So you'll want to choose empty system panel, and that'll be nothing now. So now we have our wall of mullions, which could represent our louvers. And I'm sure that you'll want to be able to customize this and draw your own profiles that could represent your louvers. So in this case, we'll create our own new family in which we could replace what is defaulted. So to do that, we can go to File, New, and Family. And this family will be a profile mullion. So select this template and we'll head into a new family project file. It has some reference lines already made and some text indicating what is what in this workspace. And basically, I'm just going to draw an outline of what my mullion I want it to have. It's going to be kind of like a long, thin fin, like that. And you'll take more care as to making it centered and to the appropriate dimensions that you need. But once you're done, you can hit Load into Project and Close. So this first action is asking us which project file we want the new family to be loaded into. So you select the file that you want. In this case, mine is project 2. Okay, and now it's asking us to save this family so it remembers the file, and I'll call it louvers. Save. Okay, so now this family that we just created and the file which we just closed is in our project file. So I can take one of these existing mullions, as I mentioned before, hit Tab to toggle through the selection, and then you'll eventually get one of the mullions and unpin it, otherwise it's locked. And then we could go to Edit Type to create a duplicate. And when I create a duplicate, then I'll replace whatever is the default profile with my new profile that I just made. So we'll make a duplicate, and I'll call this bin louver Dookie Dookie. And right now, my profile is circular, and I will change it to the one that I just created. Okay, and so I edited just this one, but in order for me to have it located in the curtain wall type properties, I had to make a duplicate of one that is existing already. So now I can see that my spin louver profile is available. Otherwise, if you don't do this step, it's not going to be in this drop-down menu. So when that is applied, now we have this whole curtain wall, which has the desired profile that we'd like. Okay, any questions so far? No? Okay, so if you do, just like shout it out and I'll stop and answer it. Right. And okay, I think, yeah, so that's basically the gist of the curtain walls. One thing probably I'd like to add is that there's this checkbox called automatically embed. In most cases, I think you'll want this on because if you have a wall, like a regular wall, for example, with generic 12-inch, and you want to place a curtain wall that's within the same, I guess, line of this wall, then if your curtain wall has that embed option checked, then it should be really easy to, we'll say that it's unconnected. 4 feet. Yeah, it'll be really easy to embed that curtain wall within this wall. And before I remember I would just specify this height and then specify this height so that they don't intersect, but have that on, otherwise you'll run into sort of problems, and this just generates the cut really nicely. So again, that was in the edit type properties for the curtain walls, and you'll want the automatically embed option checked for most cases, I'd say. Okay. And now with the other two sort of facades that we can create, we'll be dealing with massings. And I think the massings, I haven't played around with it until recently, but they're pretty, it's pretty easy to use. So in order to create a massing, we'll go to In Place Mass. And our massing is basically this new workspace in which you can create freeform objects from different curves and extrusion functions. So mainly what we'll be doing in this massing workspace is using these drawing components, drawing our shape or whatever, and then using the create form option, which has both solids and voids. So I'll discuss a little more about that. If I were to create a line, selecting my line and then hitting create form will produce a surface. So I'll hit solid form and a surface is produced. And you'll have this tool kind of like Gumball and Rhino where you can translate certain parts of the elements like edges and the surface itself. So you can use that to adjust your surface. And if I created a closed curve, like a rectangle or a circle or whatever polygon, then it will create a solid object when I choose solid form. And in this case, because it's a circle, I have a choice at the bottom whether I want it as a sphere or as a cylinder. And then again, it works in the same way where I can move around and translate certain parts of this object. Lastly, I'm going to create a few profiles each at different levels, which may need different reference planes. And what are reference planes, or work planes is what they call it in Revit, is the plane in which you can draw your element. So right now, if I were to show my work plane, this is where all my elements will be drawn on. I could change it. I could set it and choose from what's already available. And Revit will make work planes based off levels that you've created. So I could choose level 2. And so now my workspace is slightly moved up. I'll show a different level. There you go. So that has changed. And you could create your own reference planes by using this plane tool. And you'll have to be in an orthogonal view, so something like level 1, and then this becomes available. So I could draw my plane, and this will be horizontal, which you can't see in 3D mode, unfortunately, but that's why we set our reference planes. And so what I drew right there, I can now select within my drop-down menu, and it doesn't have a name, so I'm going to go back and name it. Let's call it vertical work plane. Go back to 3D view and set our work plane. And here it is, reference plane, vertical work plane, the one that we just created. And now when I click show, anything that we draw now will be set to this plane that we've created. So I'll show you, for example, draw a square or rectangle, and that's applied to this work plane. And so when you're creating something that has, it's like multifaceted, it has different angles, then I would suggest creating work planes in order to create that geometry. So that was a little bit of a digression, but what I wanted to say is I wanted to create a few profiles on different levels. So I'll do that. I'll take this circle and copy it here at this little duplicate page icon. And then in the paste section, I could align it to different levels. So I'll put it to level 2 and also roof. And I'll vary this a bit. Like I'll change location, I'll scale it slightly. Yeah. So I have a few different shapes that I can now create a form. And like in Rhino with Loft, when you have multiple shapes selected and you hit create form, oh, okay, I guess it's too close. Yeah, so when you have multiple shapes created and selected and you hit create form, it'll loft all these together in a really nice geometry. And these can be updated on the spot. So if you select the curve, again, this gumball like tool shows up, and then you could translate it. You can rotate it, etc., scale it slightly. So you can have double curved surfaces now generated in Revit, as opposed to having to make it in Rhino, import it in. This is a really easy process. So now that I have my geometry created, I want to apply a curtain system on it. So at this point, I'm happy with its shape and how it looks, and I'll finish the mask. And so now we're out of this masking workspace and back into the regular Revit workspace. And this will be indicated as a mask. Back to our masking tab, we have a few options. We can apply a curtain system, as I said, but you could also place elements like walls, floors, and roofs to this geometry. So for example, you take wall and apply it to here. But in this case, curtain wall won't apply. You can do basic walls like a generic 12-inch, and that'll work. But your curtain walls won't apply to it, which is why we need to do a curtain system, which is the next best thing. It won't have all the parameters and flexibility that a curtain wall has, but it'll come close to it. So I'll select my curtain system and apply it to my surfaces that I want. So that's fine, and I'll create my system. And one of the drawbacks is you can't change these panels and mullions into the wall in order to get curved panels and curved mullions. You'll have to deal with straight line segments. So in that case, I would adjust the type properties for this system, which are pretty similar to the curtain wall. You've got your mullions and you got your grids in both vertical and horizontal direction. And you could also choose type of curtain panels, but you can't select from the wall families. So you can't create that basic wall that's 1 inch and represents glass, and so it's curved. You'll have to deal with these straight panel segments. So I would suggest like changing the dimensions to something like 2 feet or something smaller, so it appears to be more organic than it is. And these are still straight line segments. So what you can do with a curtain system now is, again, go to Architecture tab and apply your mullions and adjust the curtain grids. So you'll have to, again, unpin these when you select them and then modify it. So for here, I want to delete it. Can I delete it? They're letting me. There we go. Oh. That's deleted. Okay. Yeah, so you could do pretty much a lot of what you can do with a curtain wall after it's been created. And you could modify it afterwards. So if you have something that's a double curved surface, you can't simply make a curtain wall. You'll have to do a massing, either in place in Revit or imported from another modeling software, and then apply our curtain system to its surface. And lastly, which I think has the most
ask a quick
interesting. Yeah, no worries.
So does the material have to be glass, or can you change it for the panels?
Oh, the material can be basically anything. So okay. I'll go back to this example here, which I've made it glass wall, but
you can apply that to the panels on the curved surface as well. Like change it from glass to be something else, like a different wall.
So you can change in this one section, edit assembly, you can change the glass to anything that's available in Revit. Okay. So it could be concrete if you want.
Okay.
And that's just in the wall itself, but you can select from whatever walls that you've created. So I could have a brick on CMU, and that'll be available in the curtain wall.
Thank you.
Okay. And the last type of, I guess, facade that we could create is the most customizable, I'd say, and it also is developed through a mask. So I'm going to go back to this mask and create a copy. Show you. There we go. Let's see. No, I'll just undo a few steps. Too lazy. Okay, we'll go back into edit place. So we're back into the masking mode, so nothing else can be selected, which is good. When you select your surface, you'll notice in this part, we have a few options. We'll look to divide surface. So we can add sort of a grid pattern onto our surface. And what I found is that there really isn't much use of it, of the surface, I mean. But when we apply a panel or frame to the surface, then that could be brought into the Revit workspace and can be modified further. So right now we're just seeing a visual display of what a grid looks like on our surface, not really much function. I can go to the properties panel and select from several types of patterns. So in this case, I could apply a rhomboid pattern, rhomboid checkered pattern. So some parts are solid, some parts are void. And I could adjust in my properties panel or this little green bar at the top, if one is selected, the division. So I can make it 6 and 6, or you could specify by distance. So in this case, I'm just specifying by division. Yeah, so there's a few things you could do. You can rotate this pattern, you can offset it, yeah, both in the U direction and V direction. What else is pertinent? That's all for now. So you could see this is what a pattern could look like on your surface, but how can we make it like an editable element in the rest of the Revit workspace? Well, we can make a new family. Like we did with mullions, we created a family that was a profile mullion. Instead, we're going to use the curtain panel pattern-based family. So we'll select that from the templates and open it. Brings us into this new workspace, a new project file. And there are a few things. We have the pattern in which we can choose from the properties panel and select whatever we had in the mapping. So now it's changed to the rhomboid checkered. And then we have the profile for our rhomboid, which I think we could adjust to. If we were to take one of these points, tabbing to toggle between the different selections and then moving it. But in this case, I want to keep it as a rhomboid and add like a frame to it. So how can we do that? Well, first thing, we'll have to make a point somewhere on this line. And the reason for that is because our point will have its own like reference plane in which we can draw a profile that's perpendicular to these lines. And essentially what we want to do is extrude a profile along this rhomboid shape, or think of it as like the sweep command in Rhino. So now that I have a work plane that is perpendicular, I can draw on it now and it'll be the profile that I desire. And once you're happy with your profile, whatever shape it is, you can select both the profile and then the path in which it will extrude along. And then you could create your form. That's not what I wanted. Create form. There we go. Should look something like that. So if we recall in our model, this is the shape of the rhomboid that's been manipulated to onto the surface, so it's a little bit warped, but if we were to apply this frame to this pattern, we'll have a frame that's a little bit inside of this shape and apply to all the rhomboids. So we'll save this now. Again, you can select certain parts of this element and adjust them with this gumball tool. So I could do that. So again, we'll save it and load it. These are two different steps, loading and saving. So loading just brings this family into the project file that we want, and saving now ensures that it's retrievable within your computer files. So I'll call this frame, I had another one, so I'll call it frame 2. And nothing has changed, we just loaded it. It's retrievable now in Revit. And when we click our surface pattern and go to our properties panel, it should now be available within the same pattern as our rhomboid checkerboard. And now I'll replace this pattern with this frame. Oh, it's a bit big. Okay. Let me do something. Let me make this huge. Okay. Oh, can we scale? Yeah, I'll scale these. Scale, whatever. And maybe make this bigger. Oh, yeah, and then we had that middle curve that we could adjust to. All right, so hopefully that's big enough. And then again, we'll select the surfaces that we want to apply the pattern to, do the divide surface command, and then we'll choose the pattern, which is under rhomboid checkerboard. And because we created a family for a frame with the same pattern as the rhomboid, then we could apply this to the geometry. And it's a little bit whack, just because the divisions are probably too much. So I could lower that 5 and 5. And that is strange. That is super strange. Why is it acting like that? Okay, no, that's a little bit better. So in this case, I'd have to probably, in my family, which was that little file we created the frame, to put it onto the rhomboid profile as opposed to inside. Otherwise, we'll have some space in between these items. But essentially, yeah, you can create like a facade from these massing components that we've applied to this form we've created. And so this one is a little bit weird. I never tried it, but yeah, you could get stuff like this based off the patterns that you use and the shapes that you create. Okay, I think that's basically it. Does anybody have any questions or want me to go over something? No? Okay, so just as a summary of what we did, we looked at curtain walls, and in their type properties, what are some of the parameters that we could adjust in order to specify both the grid, but also the type of mullions that we could apply to that grid. We also looked at how we can create our own mullion profile, just like this. So we went to File, New Family, in which we selected our profile template for the mullion. We drew that profile within the workspace and then loaded it back into here, wherein we changed this this existing mullion, created a duplicate, and from there placed the profile of this new mullion into the duplicate. So we have now a new mullion type. Secondly, we looked at how to change our panels within a curtain wall so that if you were to create a curved wall, your glass and your mullions will also be curved. So what we did was we created a new wall type that had the same material of glass and smaller thickness. But we also included a sweep that would represent our mullion. And lastly, we looked at massing. Where is it? Massing in order to apply a curtain system and also our curtain panel family to the system. Let's see, sorry, Mike wasn't. Okay, someone's asking, how can we create a sloped wall and insert windows on it? How can we create a sloped wall and add windows on it? Let's see. We can go into in-place mass, and our wall will probably be two lines that are offset from each other. So I could create a line, create a form which will make a surface, and then just modify this angle. So there's your angled wall. And once you're done, finish mask, which in our masking tab now, as I mentioned before, we have the option to do different elements from the surfaces that we've created in our masking. So I could apply a wall to this angled surface, and now we have an angled wall. And I don't know, can a window get placed onto it? Apparently so. So there you go. Let's see.
Will the window can be perpendicular, like, or on, like it just have the same angle with?
Can the window be flush with the angle of this wall? I don't know actually, but as with anything that I'm trying to solve, I always select the type and then go to type properties and see if there's anything within here that could change the angle. So in this case, I don't see anything. So right now I don't have an answer for that. I would say no, but I'm gonna look it up and just put your email in the chat, and then I'll message you the answer if there is a solution to that. But so in this case, you can create an angle wall and place like a door or a window into it, but I don't know about angling that door and window yet.
Thank you.
Okay. And someone is asking, with the last method you showed us, can we make a perforated wall? Oh yeah, I did write that in the email, the perforated walls. So when I say perforated, you can view it within a rendering, but not so much the drawings. So I'll take this exterior wall, for example, which uses a system panel. And I can edit it and duplicate it to create my own material or new material. So I'll call this like perforated panel. Okay, and currently it's glass, but we could change it to something like aluminum. And okay, there's two places we can make it perforated. And I'm saying perforated in quotations because it's not really perforated, it just appears so. So in our graphics tab, we can change our surface pattern so that it appears to be like like perforated or have holes or look like mesh. So something like this can look like it's a perforated item, just like that. And you can find your own patterns and apply it to this aluminum through, where is it? New fill pattern. And I'm pretty sure there's stuff on the internet that you could find and place it in. And the second way to do it, which appears in renderings, is to use this cutout section. So what cutout will do, it'll create a few patterns. And so you could take a look at what is available that can basically, like a cookie cutter, it takes out some of that material from the preview, and then it'll be see-through. So I'll make this a little bit bigger, like 2 and then 4. And then hopefully you could see it in the preview, but now we have holes in our material that will appear in a rendering or ray trace mode. So I'll apply that, okay. And when I change my display mode to ray trace or I create a rendering, then, oops, okay, now our panel will have perforations to it. This is obviously way too large, so you would adjust it back in that same section. So how I did that is I selected the system panel by tabbing to the panel and going to its type properties. I changed its material, in which it has a few options in both the graphics tab, where you can change how its pattern is, and that'll appear in drawings. And then also appearance, where we have the cutout checkbox checked, and then we could apply this this pattern to it of voids.